Hello viewers, welcome to today's lecture on memory interfacing. As you know, CPU can be considered as the brain of the computer, but unfortunately the memory is outside the CPU. That means your microprocessor is not having the memory inside the chip, inside the CPU, and memory is outside the chip, outside the microprocessor chip, and all the program which has to be executed will come from the memory. So, you have to interface memory to the CPU through the system bus. We shall discuss about the various types of memory technologies which are available today. Let me give an overview of the different memory technologies available today before we discuss the way the memory interfacing is done. The memory technology can be broadly divided into three categories. As you can see here, the first one is semiconductor memory technology, random access memory and read-only memory belong to this category. Next comes the memory disk technology, floppy, hard disk, CD-ROM. These are all based on magnetic disk technology. That means information is stored magnetically on various mediums. Third category is magnetic tape technology, where different types of tapes and digital audio tape DAT, these are based on magnetic tape technologies. Now, the uh, the comparison can be made in terms of access time. Access time is essentially the round trip delay between the CPU and the memory. CPU, as you know, sends the address which goes to the memory, and memory, after receiving the address, generates the data and which goes back to the CPU. So, this round trip delay is known as the access time. So, as you can see here, access time is smaller and smaller for as you go up. That means the magnetic tape technologies are slowest, or it takes a time of the order of 1 second or even more than that. On the other hand, magnetic disk technology takes time of the order of millisecond, as you can see, for accessing data from different types of magnetic disk technology devices like floppy, hard disk and CD-ROM. On the other hand, semiconductor memory technology, semiconductor memory devices like RAM and ROM are much faster, which takes time of the order of nanosecond. Obviously, this is the fastest, and semiconductor memory technology is fastest. If you compare in terms of cost, we will find that the cost of the semiconductor memory devices is much higher compared to magnetic tape, magnetic disk technology devices, or even the magneto-optic or optical devices. Here the cost is relative. I have not given any cost. It is relative cost, essentially cost per byte. And as you can see here, with year, the cost is decreasing. Say this is 1985, let's assume, and this is 1995. So cost of all the different devices based on either semiconductor memory technology or magnetic disk technology or magneto-optic or optical technology, as you can see here, the costs are decreasing every year, and obviously in spite of that, you will find that these relative costs are remaining more or less same. That means the cost per byte of semiconductor memory devices is much higher compared to say hard disk based on magnetic technology. So, this cost performance, as you can see here, if you want higher performance, higher cost, and based on this these properties of access time, storage capacity and cost, the memory devices can be organized in a hierarchical manner. Let us see how we can organize the different types of memories in a hierarchical manner to get best cost performance. We can draw a diagram where the different memory technologies can be, hierarchical diagram can be shown. At the 0th level, we can keep the registers. As you know, registers are inside the CPU. So in the in a strict sense, you cannot say that this is outside, this is the memory technology, but this is the fastest memory which is available inside the CPU complex. So we can say that this is possibly the 0th level memory and which is inside the CPU. And next comes the main memory. Main memory can be considered in the level 1, and as you know, main memory is directly connected to the system bus, and as a result the it has to be fastest, the speed should be compatible with the CPU, and usually main memory devices, main memory is used realized with the help of semiconductor memory devices. Here we have shown the semiconductor memory technologies, RAM, ROM, and RAM, ROM are used as the main memory. Then comes the second level, the secondary memory. The secondary memory is implemented with the help of hard disk, magnetic hard disk usually, or it can be even floppy disk, and these are realized with the help of this magnetic disk technology. Obviously, this is little slower than relatively slower than about 3 to 4 order of magnitude slower than the semiconductor memory devices. Finally comes the, at the 4th level comes the backup memory. And backup memory devices are realized by using different types of tapes. For example, DAT, and in the early years bigger size tapes were used. So different types of tapes are used. Now we can categorize them in terms of several parameters. The most important parameters are memory size, SI, what is the size of the memory that can be used, then access time, TI, then the cost. Here cost is cost per byte, so CI, then unit of transfer, say unit of transfer, I can give it as say say MI, and then transfer bandwidth. BI. So these are the various parameters by which we can characterize the hierarchical organization. So if you look at the size, then you will find that the size is gradually increasing towards in this direction. That means the number of registers is relatively much smaller than the main memory, and secondary memory size is much larger than the main memory. Backup memory is much larger than the secondary memory. So this way. On the other hand, access time is also becoming more and more as you go to higher level. For example, registers are the fastest, then comes the main memory, then the secondary memory, then the backup memory. Unit of transfer, unit of transfer is also larger as you go towards this direction. That means registers are read in terms of bytes, main memories are read in terms of words, secondary memories are read in terms of sectors. On the other hand, backup memories are read in terms of blocks. So increasing size. On the other hand, bandwidth is obviously is more as you go up. That means the rate at which data transfer takes place is fastest in case of register, then comes the main memory, then comes the secondary memory, then comes the backup memory. Let me illustrate, let me try to explain this hierarchical memory organization with an analogy. Say the book you issue from the library. As you know, in a semester you get few books which can be issued from the central library. The books which you issue and can be kept in your drawer, and one or two books at a particular instant you will read one book which you will keep on the desk. The book you are keeping on the desk can be considered as the main memory. That means all the reading that you can do is the book which is on the desk. So main memory corresponds to the memory devices which are used to store the program, and any program you want to execute must be present in the main memory. That's why it is called main memory and prime memory. It is the important characteristic that any program which you want to execute must be present on the main memory. Just like the book you want to read must be present on the desk. Now the set of books that you have issued can be considered as secondary memory. That means those books are readily accessible, but you have to take out from the drawer and put it on the desk before you can read it. So the file you want to, which you have stored in secondary memory, have to be transferred to the main memory before the programs can be executed. So the secondary memory, hard disk, these are readily accessible, always present in the system, but you have to transfer from the secondary memory to the main memory, from the hard disk to the secondary memory or main memory before the programs can be executed. And obviously the size of this is larger than the main memory. You can have 3 or 6 books issued from the library and kept with you. Then comes the backup memory. Backup memory can be considered as the whole central library. Central library can have large number of books, but unfortunately the books in the central library are not readily accessible. You have to go and borrow. And another important point is the backup memory is detachable from the system. So the central library can be considered as equivalent to backup memory. Size is unlimited, but not readily accessible. And one important property is that these are detachable from the system. That's why tapes, CD-ROMs, they can be used as the backup memory. So in this way, we try to get best performance. Later on, you will see that in spite of the fact the speed of main memory is increasing, speed of all the devices increasing, there is a big gap between the speed of the CPU and the main memory devices. To bridge the gap, another level of memory is used, which are known as cache memory, particularly in high performance computers, or nowadays in even your Pentium processors, these are available. And this is also the cache is also present as part of the CPU. So you can see this is how the hierarchical memory organization is done. But in today's lecture, our primary focus is on main memory. and we shall discuss how different types of main memories, particularly semiconductor memories, are used as main memory, and what are the different types of main memories used in with microprocessors. Particularly for small systems, the target of this course is not general purpose computers, as I have told many times. We are interested in making embedded systems, smaller systems, where the main memory will be mainly the semiconductor memory, and other memory devices may not be present at all. So let us focus on the main memory, which are primarily realized by using semiconductor memory devices. We can categorize it in this way: memory category, then the eraser, memory. Okay, we can memory type. This is one. These are the different types of memories. Then the category in which we group them. Then the erasure facility, erasing facility, write mechanism, and volatility. So these are the parameters by which you can categorize the different memory devices. Write mechanism, first comes the RAM, random access memory. The RAM can be read-write. Random access memory are read-write type. These are fast read-write type memories, and you can perform erasure, that means writing modification can be done by using electrical means. Electrically, you can perform erasing electrically, and the erasing can be done byte level. That means modification can be done at byte level. And write mechanism is also electrically. And the RAM is volatile in nature. And this is the most important memory which is present in the microprocessor based systems. And let us focus on the RAM technologies, the way the RAM is implemented, what are the different types of RAM, before we discuss about the other memory types. So first we consider the random access memories, RAMs. The RAMs can be broadly divided into two types: static and dynamic. The static memory devices are realized by using flip-flop like cells. Say this is one, I am realizing one particular cell. You may be knowing, those who have studied VLSI circuit, this is the typical CMOS inverter. This is a CMOS inverter. Now the CMOS inverters are connected back to back. The output of this is connected to input of the other inverter, and output of this inverter is connected to input of this inverter. So this makes a flip-flop because of the positive feedback. Here is your VDD, supply voltage. Here is your ground. Then you can store either 0 or 1 in this particular flip-flop or static memory cell. And for reading purpose, you will require two more transistors. This is your word. And here goes two lines. This is your bit level reading, and this is your word level reading. This is your bit and bit bar. So here you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is the 6 transistor, typical 6 transistor static RAM. Cell. On the other hand, the dynamic RAM requires only one transistor. You can realize a static dynamic RAM by just using one transistor. This is your row and here is your column. Row. You will see that memories will be organized in rows and columns. This is the storage capacitor. This is storage capacitor where information is stored. That means in dynamic RAM, you are storing information 0 or 1 in capacitors. And you may be asking why you are doing that. The main reason is that you can see to store 1 bit of information, you require only one transistor. On the other hand, here you require 6 transistors. Obviously, the static RAM will require more chip area per cell. On the other hand, dynamic RAM will require much lesser area. This is your column capacitor. And that's why this one transistor dynamic RAM cell dynamic RAM cell is widely used for implementing dynamic RAMs. Obviously, the static RAM is widely used, particularly in small systems, because you will see that the dynamic RAM, although has some advantage, the capacity of the chip is much higher, about 4 times. That means by using the same technology, a single chip can accommodate 4 times the memory size of the corresponding static RAM. That means the dynamic RAMs are denser, but dynamic RAMs has the problem you are storing information is in capacitors, which is essentially the drain to substrate capacitor. And this capacitor is leaky. That means information which is stored which leaks away. Any capacitor leaks away. This capacitor also leaks away. So you have to make special arrangements for refreshing it at regular interval, and that's why this dynamic RAM interfacing is little difficult and complicated. And although it is cheaper and gives you the cheapest memory to be interfaced in large systems, particularly in general purpose computers, workstations and servers, DRAM is widely used, but you will see for small systems static RAM is preferred, particularly to avoid the interfacing complexity of dynamic RAM. And by using this single cell, how a typical SRAM architecture is realized is shown here. Usually, the inside the chip, RAM is organized in 2 dimensions, as you can see here, row and column. You may be asking why. The reason for that is, suppose you don't use 2 dimension, then you will apply all the address lines. Say you have got 16 address line. So after you apply 16 address line, it will go to decoder, and decoder will generate how many lines? 2 to the power 16. So decoder will require say this is your say 0 to n, where n is equal to 2 to the power 16 minus 1. So 0 to n, 2 to the power 16 functions are to be generated, and each function is a each function is a decoder function is a function of 16 variables. So the decoding circuit is very complex. On the other hand, suppose we divide it into two dimensions. The address lines are divided in two dimensions. Here we use, say, this is your row and column. Just like that, this is your row and this is your column. Then 16 address lines are divided into 8 into 8. So let's assume here we use A0 to 7 and here A8 to 15. So this is the row address, this is the column address. Then how many lines will be here? 2 to the power 8, 0 to 255, and here also you will require 0 to 255. So if you add up the complexity, what is the complexity of each of the decoders? How many lines are there? You have altogether 2 to the power 8, 2 into 2 to the power 8 lines. And each of them is a function of 8 lines, 8 address lines. So you can see here the total number of decoder functions, the functions that you are realized by using the decoder section is much smaller here, about root n times. So here the complexity is root n times compared to n times the complexity here. So here root n times, here root n times. And as a consequence, in all the memories, the inside the chip, the memory is organized in two dimensions. So here the row address, and we apply the column address here. The total address lines are divided into two parts. Then the address buffer is used for both row and column, and then they are decoded. They are decoded here, column address decoder. And here it is row address decoder. And after decoding, we apply it to a this is your memory cells inside this particular area, cell array we can say. And here each of these cells, this particular cell corresponds to this. So here you have got a cell. And then there is sense amplifier and write circuit, and which reads data, amplifies it, and then through these lines, data inputted output, you read data into any cell, and the data which is stored in it can be taken out. This is the typical SRAM architecture. And similarly, you can have a simplified, I have shown a simplified DRAM architecture just to illustrate how, see here each cell is only single transistor cells, and same way you use the row address, column address. As you can see here, the row address and column address is amplified, and here only two address lines are here because you have only 4 cells, and the column address latch is here, row address information is held here, so column address amplifier is here. Then you are doing the decoding, and data which is coming out from this can be read, will go to this buffer, and through this buffer the data reading and writing will take place. And as you can see here, each column is having a sense amplifier. That's why whenever you access any element of the row, all the elements of the row gets refreshed because of the sense amplifier, because all the elements of the row gets energized. And that's why whenever we shall discuss later on, if time permits, about the interfacing of dynamic RAM refreshing, then you will see whenever you refresh a particular cell in a row, all the elements of the row gets refreshed. Now you may be asking, what are the relative merits and demerits of SRAM and DRAM? Obviously, SRAM and DRAM, if we write, so SRAM has lower density, lower packaging density. Here you get higher packaging density. and SRAM has been found to be faster. And that is the reason why in your hierarchical memory organization you will find the cache memory is realized by using SRAM. On the other hand, in most of the computer systems, the main memory is implemented by using dynamic RAM. So it is less faster, or you can say slower. SRAM is faster than dynamic RAM. Then cost wise, this is costlier, and this is cheaper. And these are the main typical three main characteristics of the SRAM and dynamic RAM. Of course, there is another one, interfacing simpler. Here, as I have already mentioned, you have to use refreshing for the memories, as well as we shall see that the row address and column address do not come simultaneously, and as a consequence the interfacing is very complex. Interfacing complex or difficult, you can say. And because of these reasons, SRAM is widely used in small system instead of DRAM. Now, after discussing the random access memories, let us focus on the second type, ROM, read-only memory. And read-only memory is only, you can perform only read operation. So erasing is not possible. And it is this read-only memory is mask programmable. I shall explain what we mean by that, and it is non-volatile. You may be asking, why do we need ROM? Only RAM can serve our purpose. But you will see that any computer, small or big, will require some ROM as part of their main memory. The reason for that is, as you put the power on, some program inside the computer must become active. So they have to be stored in some non-volatile main memory. Non-volatile means as you turn the power off, the program should not vanish, should not be erased. So that program which should be stored in non-volatile ROM, non-volatile memory, are stored in read-only memory. And particularly a part of the operating system, loader, and those programs are stored in ROM, or monitor program is stored in ROM. So as its name suggests, ROM is, once some program is stored, it cannot be modified. You cannot modify it, because the programming has been done only once, and once program is written, it cannot be modified. You can only read and execute. Although let us try to understand how ROM is realized, and so that we can understand the interfacing of the ROM. In case of read-only memory also, the basic structure is same. You apply the address, say A0, A1 to AN-1, assuming that n bit address is provided. And this goes to a decoder, and decoder generates those decoded lines, n decoded lines 0 to n, where n is equal to the power n minus 1. Then these are we may consider these as the input lines. These address lines can be considered as the input lines to the ROM. Whereas you have got a number of output lines or data lines, they may be considered as these lines can be considered as the output lines 0 1 0 0, output 0, output 1, output m minus 1. Let's assume you have got m output lines. Then at each junction you have a cell where the information is stored. In the simplest form, I have blown it up. It can be a diode. You can have a diode. That means whenever this is 1, whenever you have applied an address and this particular line is selected, this is 1, then through this diode that 1 will come to this line, to this output. So if this diode is present, then that information which is on this decoded line will come to this output. If this diode is not present, then it will not come. So at the time of fabrication, this diode is fabricated or it is removed. So in each cell, while fabricating in the factory, while making the mask of the VLSI chip, either this diode is present or not present. So based on that, the ROM program is done, and as a result, once program is done, it cannot be modified in future. Of course, not only diode, you can use transistors as well. For example, this is the two lines. You can put one MOS transistor, NMOS transistor. Now this MOS transistor, if it is present, then again if this is 1, this becomes 0. In this case this becomes 0. Normally it is 1. On the other hand, if this line is not fabricated, then irrespective of whatever is present on this line, nothing will come. So this is how the read-only memory is realized. And each cell can be a single diode or a transistor, as you can see. And as a consequence, ROM has relatively larger capacity than ROM has relatively larger capacity than RAM. A particular chip can accommodate large number of memory cells. Of course, the concept of ROM has been extended in the subsequent years, leading to other types of ROM like electrically programmable ROM. This is also read-only. You can say that read mostly. Most of the time we'll be doing the reading. And here you can perform the erasing, and you can perform the erasing by full chip level. That means whenever you do erasing, all the contents of the chip will be erased, and writing can be done electrically, and it is also non-volatile. Obviously, all the ROMs will be non-volatile. Now, how EPROM is realized? What is done, in place of a single transistor like this, a special type of transistor with a floating gate is fabricated. In place of, here we have seen how a transistor can be used. Now in place of this transistor, a transistor with a floating gate is fabricated. So floating gate structure is somewhat like this. So you have the source and drains, N plus, N plus. This is your substrate, P-type substrate. Then you have got a, this is drain connected to VDD, source is connected to ground, and here is your floating gate, and here is your select gate. Then how the writing is done? This can be explained with the help of a potential well. As you know, this transistor will be on whenever you apply positive voltage on the gate. Then some channel is created and the transistor is on. But because of the presence of the floating gate in that insulating region, normally by applying small voltage this transistor will not be on. But the insulation has been done in such a way that this kind of uh, gap is created. So electrons are here. What is being done? The select gate is applied a high voltage such that the electrons are falls into this well. This is trapped in the soil. That means this floating, in other words, this floating gate is charged with positive voltage, and these electrons remains trapped when this high voltage is removed. And this well is so permanent that it will remain until we don't disturb it. That means by applying high electric voltage, you can charge this floating gate and put the electrons there, and then all this channel turns on. How do you erase it? The erasing can be done by applying ultraviolet light. So with the help of photons of suitable frequency, you bombard the electron. So the electron gets energy from the photon and comes out of this oil. So here, as you can see here, this charge of this gate will be dissipated as you expose it to ultraviolet light for say about 20 minutes. So whenever the erasing is done, the entire cell gets erased. That means that's why I have written full chip level erasing is done. Obviously, this erasing, for erasing purpose, you have to take out the EEPROM chip from the system, and then the erasing can be done. So this is not a very good idea. You have to take out the chip from the system, then you have to put it in some kind of ultraviolet light, then you can do the erasing. And for programming also, you have to use a special device known as EEPROM programmer, which has the facility for applying high voltage to those select gates, and programming can be done. So you have to do erasing and writing offline. On the other hand, whenever you are using it, obviously you can use it online, but then the erasing and writing is very difficult. Another ROM was marketed, which is known as electrically erasable ROM, erasable programmable ROM. That means here you can, this is read mostly, here in this case you can do modification electrically. And it can be done just like the RAM byte level. So whenever it was introduced, people have lot of expectation from this EEPROM, that possibly EEPROM will serve the purpose of the main memory technology forever. But unfortunately, the EEROM, electrically erasable and programmable ROM, did not live up to the expectations, and particularly it has many limitations of high cost. The EEROM, or it is also called electrically alterable ROM, has, because of the high cost, low density, and most important is not very reliable, unreliable. Because of these three properties, high cost, low packaging density, and unreliability shown by EEROMs, this EEROM or electrically erasable programmable ROM was not very successful. And as a result, this was replaced by one of its cousin, which you may call flash memory. This is also read mostly, but here the only thing that the different from EROM is that eraser is not uh, mm, not byte level but chip level. That means erasing can be done at chip level. All the elements are erased in a flash, and this can be done electrically. This is also electrically right mechanism, and these are all non-volatile. So let us try to understand what is the main feature of flash memory. Actually, it uses the it has it has best of both the worlds of these two technologies, EPROM and EEROM, EEPROM. You see, the EPROM, as you have seen, is very reliable, fast, and random access memory. On the other hand, EEPROM is not very reliable. So what has been done with the high reliability and low cost of EPROM, the electrical erasing facility has been added in flash memory. So it enjoys best of both the worlds of EPROM and EEPROM, and flash memory has become very popular nowadays. Particularly flash memory devices can have access time of say 150 nanosecond, quite fast. So when you are using it online, then it is very fast. Of course, for erasing purpose, it will require about 2 seconds, and it can be done in the chip level, as I have told. That means all the elements within the chip gets erased just like your electrically that EPROM, electrically programmable ROM. And for to program it, it will require about 4 seconds. So entire chip can be programmed in about 4 seconds. And the advantage of flash memory is that you can write over and over again. You can modify the contents over and over again, and at the same time it is non-volatile, and you can do the reading and writing 1,000 times, 1,000 cycles of erasing and writing. I mean, writing is possible in case of flash memory. So flash memory is becoming very popular and is being widely used in most of the embedded system nowadays. Now comes the question of chip packaging. We have discussed the various types of technologies. Obviously, the main memory all are implemented by using semiconductor memory technology, and obviously they are available in the form of chips, and each chip will be provided with address lines, say A0 to N-1, n address lines, data lines. Data lines will be say 0 to M-1, assuming that there are m data lines. The m can vary from 0 to some number, 8 usually. Then you have to provide the power supply line, VDD, ground line, say VSS. Then you will require chip enable line, because in a single system we will find that there will be large number of chips connected to the system, and at a time only one of the chip will be selected, and you will require output lines, output enable line, and finally to perform reading and writing you will require read write control line. So this is output enable, so read write control line. So these are the various lines which must be provided to the chip, so that the inside the chip can be addressed. I mean, the information stored in the devices can be accessed from outside. Let us consider 3 examples. One is ROM, essentially EEPROM, which is the most popular device. This is your RAM, 6116 static RAM, SRAM, which has the capacity of 2K into 4. By 2K into 4, I mean it has got 2K words. So it has got A0 to 10 address line. 11 address lines are required to address 2K lines, 2K locations. Then it has got chip select, output enable, and write enable lines for control purposes. And it is 8 means it has got 8 lines, data lines, D0 to 7. Then it has got, so this is your static RAM, a typical static RAM chip, 2716 EEPROM, another which is also very popular. It has the same organization as the 2K into 8, and the various lines provided for accessing is A0 to 10, then data lines D0 to 7. It has got chip enable program. So as you have seen, this chip has to be programmed, and for programming purpose you require a separate line, and then you have got output enable line, and another line is there, VPP. So this is the typical organization of the chip lines, various signal lines provided in EEPROM. Then you have got another RAM, that is your dynamic RAM, 64K into 1. So you see the capacity is much higher than the static RAM or EEPROM. Here, as I told, the address lines are applied in multiplexed form. I shall explain in my next class why this is required, why it has been done. This is your row address select, that means row address and column address are applied separately. Then you will require write enable, and since it is single bit, you will require just D out and D in. So we can conclude this lecture by saying that we have discussed about different memory technologies which are used in microprocessor based systems. We have discussed the hierarchical organization, starting from the registers, main memory, secondary memory, and backup memory, their need, and also we have discussed the different types of semiconductor memory devices used as main memory devices, particularly RAM, different types of ROM. And in the next lecture, we shall discuss how these main memory devices can be interfaced to the microprocessor, what are the problems, and how these problems are overcome. Thank you.